Members are present. If you just want to state your name for the record, please.
Right this way. Shane Kubishak, City Council member.
Steve Proth, Alderman.
Jake Kavanaugh, Alderman.
Scott Kellogg, Alderman.
Zach Rulick, Mayor.
Tom Riom, Alderman.
Lee Graff, Alderman.
Shane Blazer, Alderman.
Heather Cole, Observer.
Rick Bacoka, Reggie.
Sue Show, City Attorney.
Mary Jo Haney, citizen.
Keith Hetzel, citizen.
Joe Terry, Director of Public Works.
Joe Zerflu, Alderperson. Agenda item number 2, consider a referral from Alderperson Koth that effective for the budget year 2019, the Finance Property Committee be notified and allowed to take action for or against any project that requires a bid or any project that requires bonding. See if you want to start with that.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory after what happened at the budget a couple weeks ago that if we have certain projects that we need to be sure that we want to do, now would be the time to address them before we send out contracts, go to a bid, and then we get a bid, and then we end up taking the whole thing to council and then find out that there's no public desire to pursue that project. So just make a motion that the Property and Finance Committee is required or is notified of any bids or bond issues that come up, and that is discussed at the committee level.
Shane. I'm sorry. Steve was talking.
I agree with Steve. I think, and I think with the capital improvement or capitals project that, it'd be nice after new council is elected in April, May, June, that we have a meeting, or maybe even a special meeting, where we can go through next year's capital projects. And because you might have a turnover whole council, and that new council may not have any interest in the list of capital projects on there. Or so at that time, I think those projects should be gone through in detail and decided that scope of that project, so we don't have a budget meeting like we did before. I agree with Steve.
Well, I guess I agree with both of you too. It just feels like we cram everything into basically October, and then you have to make your decisions, and I think doing it in May, June after a new council definitely speed things up, at least give people more time to really evaluate projects.
And we don't have to waste council time doing that either. That should be done long. It's not something that's just coming to council for the first time. It's been talked about by a previous council, and there's no reason why we can't sit down and go through those projects.
Still looking for a second motion I threw out, but I would also say that
You're not a kid anymore.
Oh, sorry.
Technicality.
I'd also say that maybe there needs to be something to get the public to the committee meetings when these things come up. I know the committee meetings is where a lot of this stuff is discussed and hashed out, and maybe something that the city can start looking at doing in the future, since we have a segment of the population that doesn't have internet. I think it's like 15% they figure doesn't have internet. Everybody gets a utility bill, so I mean, if there's going to be something that's a huge project, notify the residents via the utility bill of the committee meeting that it's going to be on there so that people can show up to the committee meeting. This isn't the first time we've had something similar. I was at a Public Works Committee meeting last year where there were a bunch of folks on Quinnell's Creek that were disappointed with the dredging project. They said they weren't notified, and they all got tax assessments, and they all showed up after the fact. So maybe it's a better idea to be more proactive other than reactive on a lot of this stuff.
Mr. Mayor?
I think just as a point of clarification on the last point, everyone that was specially assessed did receive written notices. I think just to close the loop on
Yeah.
this, so nobody thinks that the city acted without providing notice. But my point I wanted to make was the referral is actually redundant, and I believe that the Public Works Committee reserves the right and should be approving the Public Works Committee projects. I think to have the Finance and Property Committee, which ultimately will establish the budget, recommend the budget later in the year, the Public Works Committee really is the committee that's where all those things should be vetted. They're the ones that are approving the bids, letting projects, on the first step, and then approving the bids later on. That to take that power away from the Public Works Committee, I'm not sure what the Finance and Property Committee, unless the Finance and Property Committee wants a bunch more work, It's actually duplication. I don't know if Attorney Schill has anything to add about that, but I think the council ultimately is approving everything that the committees are discussing. The scope and the type of work should be reserved for the Public Works Committee.
That's the question I was gonna raise, of, what the intent really was.
Yeah, I agree with Tom that the scope and the mayor, the scope and those projects should be done in Public Works, but ultimately finance allocates the money for it. And we approve that allocation. So
Actually, I was just going to clarify.
the council does ultimately, but finance makes those recommendations too. And, or I guess as a finance, we'll just, before budget, we'll just have a capital improvements meeting and by then the scope should already be decided. I don't know what the answer is, but I agree. Those things should be done ahead of time.
I think to maybe echo a little bit of kind of what everybody's saying here is that basically we want to get out in front of some of these projects before they happen. As new council members come on, it gives them an education. Mr. Terry, all the 5-year plan, the consecutive plan, it gets new council members engaged at an earlier stage where they can help make healthier decisions. And go back to what Mr. Cole's referral is. Now, maybe it's a committee of the whole that's mandatory. Every June we do a committee of the whole meeting to discuss and vet out some of these issues, and then it goes through the Public Works. But at least new members and existing members can educate the council in general on the projects that we want to see moving forward for the budget. I do agree that there's we need to somehow put some sort of policy in place that allows new guys to really get up to speed in a hurry. Okay, because by saying that we have opportunities as council members to reach out to city staff and stuff, well, to be honest with you, nobody has that kind of time. You know, everybody puts forth an effort to reach out on everything that they can see come across for every committee. I think by having some sort of a regimented, steadfast plan that gets everybody together, then from there it might spawn some more reaching out where they would have more opportunities to reach out after that because they'd maybe be a little bit more educated about what's going on.
Well, especially because last year the council might have approved something, but a whole new set of council members might be elected because the public wasn't in favor of what was approved last year. So I think that new council needs to make a decision going forward when the budget's being developed.
Well, in terms of notifying the public too, I've had a few comments since I've been on council about people having trouble finding out what is going to be on the agenda. And I think even if you go on our city website, it's not out there, it's harder to find. You can tell when the meeting is, but as far as the specific agenda items, I know some folks wonder, should I come to the meeting or is it going to be something that's not going to be of interest to me? So if there's any way we can take a look at that to get that information out. I know oftentimes these don't come out until a few days before or the week before. But yeah, I think we need to do a better job at getting that up to the public so there's more transparency there.
And I agree. I think we've been struggling with this for a long time when the paper stopped doing agendas. That really kind of cut out the public on that information. Because really, realistically, the only place now is stop in the clerk's office or you go in the front doors and you can see them. And that's really about the only place you can see where the agendas are. And I know at one time we looked at, and there was a significant cost to actually doing an ad type thing in the paper with the agendas. But of course it wasn't going to be free and it wasn't going to be at a reduced rate either. And agendas can be long, as we've seen.
I know lack of internet access is a concern to some, but for a lot of people do have it, and I don't think we even have them out on our website. Like, we have the upcoming events right on the front page, but there's nowhere to click in and see exactly what that agenda is going to be for that meeting. So that there could be a way there that we could.
And with the new clerk, maybe that's something they can go back to doing.
Right.
That was exactly my point. We elect our clerk. The clerk's accountable to the people to engage the public on what's on our agendas. I mean, I hope that, and I would say that this body, I try to do my best to push the clerk and encourage the clerk to get this stuff accessible and get it out there. And I know you all probably do the same when you speak to the clerk, and I would just hope that the future clerk, the elected clerk, is accountable to the people in the sense that if people want to be informed, they need to be going to the clerk to tell them how they get their information, right? And if they're not getting access to our meeting notices or if they're having issues, that's the clerk. That's nobody else's fault but the clerks. And so or the public, the citizenry that complains about everything but doesn't want to show up or read the meeting notices. I mean, it's twofold, so.
As for, I'm sorry, but I think we have to talk with Water Lake, because it's not something very simple to insert things into the bill that easily. There is
It's very expensive to the city.
Very
to use Water and
expensive
Lake
to
bills
do-
to insert.
to do it, mail inserts into the bills, because they have a big machine and they can only insert so many things, and
But they contract it out now with a provider.
all.
Yeah, so they charge us to use the utility bills to.
And then if you're electronic, you don't even get a paper bill
Yeah.
in the mail at all.
Yeah,
But definitely, I think, to go back to Mr. Catnall's point, is communication's the hardest thing. It doesn't matter which business you're in, communication's the hardest thing, and, I mean, if we need to do a little bit more research on what we can do to communicate better, more effective, let's take advantage of it and move forward, and I'm not discounting mailings or anything, but it would be really tough to do, obviously, every single meeting, but I mean, I don't know how else to communicate that. Like you said, maybe it's on the website.
I think the website would be a great start. It's an easy go-to. You can see what meetings are coming up, but you can't see the agenda items. So it's almost like we just need to take one more step and we can solve a lot of that.
And I think as a council, we can't obviously direct the clerk on what they can do, but we can highly suggest that that's something we want to see.
Right.
Mr. Terry, and then we'll do Tom.
Yeah, for the benefit of the Finance Committee, just wanted to let you know that at the Public Works Committee this last year, I think it was May and June, for 2 consecutive months, we reviewed the capital improvement plan that was brought before the council and approved. And before any, street construction type project starts, there's a preliminary resolution that's performed by the Public Works Committee. Within 10 days after that preliminary resolution by policy, the property owners that are affected by that project are notified in writing of the intent of that project. And we're to the point now where we're back on a schedule where we're trying to work 2 years in advance, because a lot of these projects take a lot of time to do a preliminary survey, do design work. So what we could try to do is, I know everybody gets the agendas for all of the committees. And we could try to call out, especially when we're reviewing that capital improvement plan. But we did spend 2 months reviewing the projects, and we'll be doing the same thing this year. We'll be spending a couple months, present it to the committee, not take action for a month, review it the following month, and then take action, because we do need to direct staff to start the design work and start some planning work, and that oftentimes takes quite a while. And I guess if there is a motion to move forward, I do feel that there's a need for some clarification, because the scope of projects are determined early on, sometimes 2 years in advance, through the capital improvement plan process, which isn't to say that at the last minute the scope can't change, and committees and council review and change components of projects. But if a project is let for bid, generally the Public Works Committee has spent time reviewing plans, discussing the project. Certainly we could come to maybe have a committee of the whole, but to come to the Finance Committee and to review all of that again would require additional staff time. If we could consolidate it as essentially one process and make sure that everybody's well informed, I think we'd have most efficient use of staff time and resources and to get that information out.
Oh, Tom's next.
I am somewhat not confused anymore. I was. I just wanted to make sure, so I listened. I hear about that if a new council would be elected and whatever in April, that for them to change that they may not want to do what is ever on the plan for the next couple of years. That's true, but work has been, what's on that plan has been put there to proceed with that. As Joe said, it could change. Anything can change, but I hope it's not that come April that with a new council or whatever, that the budget that was done the year before, for that year, say 2019 now that's coming up, that if there's new people on the council, the budget has been approved for that, for those projects. Now, things can change. It comes way, you know, the bid comes in way out of sight or whatever it is, but, you know, it has been made to do these projects. And they're on the list, Joe said, they're 2 years ahead of time. We're trying to continue with that and even look out further of what projects there are. And I just, I think whoever is on Public Works, that, to me, it seems like they want it, something being taken away from Public Works, for finance. Obviously, the money goes through finance, but to me, I'm looking at this as that finance is making the determination. They can make the determination on money, but not as if the project goes. And it still goes to the council, and that, which still ends up with them.
Mr. Chairperson, I guess I'm confused too with, I mean, this is more of a committee of the whole type of a discussion. I mean, how did this even, Chairperson, how did this even get on the agenda?
It was referral at last council meeting.
Because this is, we're not even at that point yet. And now we've wasted 15 minutes that we could be talking about other things. I mean, no one's on the same page with this. I do agree that we need further discussion on it, but holy cow, you know, we're not at that point for a committee meeting to be discussing this.
I do have concerns about jurisdiction of committees. And I know, I mean, finance does decide anyway as full council. No, it's not, you know, a different dynamic than a committee meeting, you know, 2 out of 3 rather than 5 out of 8, but. Mr. Blazer.
I don't think, I think a committee of the whole meeting or a special council meeting or some at that level where we can discuss scopes of project. Am I personally against a pool project or phase 2? No, but do I think there are items in those projects that I personally don't feel need to be in there or want to see in there? And I think people get elected in April, they're inheriting a budget that's not theirs. Then the next year, you're inheriting projects that are from previous councils. So what's the point? You're getting a budget from one council and then you're getting projects from other councils. So there's got to be some ownership by the new council. And I think having a committee of the whole meeting where we discuss maybe some scopes of some of the projects that are going to be in the budget next year, so staff can plan budgetarily. I'd like to see that at least.
I'd like to make a point too, and my belief is, I mean, we're all on 2-year terms. The council can turn over by half each year, and the mayoral term is 2 years as well. We can't. I don't think we should go down the path of worrying about what is going to happen or what the new thought of the new members of council will be, or possibly other positions. I mean, we could get into that every year, and it's always going to be a concern. So, what's decided, you kind of have to live with, and then if we wanted to have a committee of the whole meeting and decide that when some of that turns over, I could definitely agree with that. But the mindset of being worried about what may or may not happen on election season, I just can't see. I don't think that should be something that is on the forefront. It's for that council to then decide, in my opinion. But
we're going way in my for what the consideration is.
I guess, does the committee want to take any action on this item? Don't see any, then we will move to item number 3. Consider a referral from Alderperson Coth that the public hearing for the annual budget be held prior to the council meeting, that the budget will be voted on.
No, I was going.
All right, well, I guess we kind of just covered a lot of it in the previous discussion, but I think what we saw 2 weeks ago at our council meeting wasn't the direction that we should have gone in with our budget, and that we need to look at moving our public hearing up. So when the citizens of the city show up, if there's concerns about the budget, if there's something that needs to be redone, something that needs to be looked at again, that there's an adequate amount of time to take and rework that budget, so we're not looking like the kid that went to school the night before the presentation and crammed everything in and tried to wing it through school the next day.
Mr. Mayor?
And I don't disagree, the public hearing could or should be moved up. I think it might afford everyone some opportunity to take that input and then take action from it. So I think that that's appropriate and has been done in the past, as I understand, and many years ago, as far as I understand. One thing, as I've listened to the previous discussion, as well as input from all the persons and staff since the last council meeting, is I think it would make sense for staff to propose a 2019 calendar for the 2020 budget. And that would give the public the opportunity to see when individual departments are working on their requests, when their worksheets are distributed for them to begin their work, for the capital improvement plan meetings to occur as it were previously discussed. I think, Tim couldn't be here tonight, but that was the conversation he and I had most recently, is we probably should put out a full calendar year schedule. Department heads occasionally are late, and we need to probably have some recourse for late and tardiness, because it pushes everything back into October, and then I'm advancing departmental requests that are complete to a degree but not reviewed internally. And so with an executive budget process, I think having some hard deadlines that everyone is holding themselves to, you certainly can do what you want with it, but I think that would give staff an opportunity to really work towards some schedules that give everyone an ample opportunity to review the budget, consider their changes, and frankly, just from an accountability measure, I think having a schedule for those items, when their deadlines are and when the committees are going to meet. I mean, in 6.5 years, you held 7 meetings. I think that was the most amount of meetings. I think maybe 4 or 5 was common for committees, finance committee in the past. So to say that there wasn't enough public input, I think is completely in contrary to the committee that held all those public meetings. And so I think just having a schedule for everyone to be aware of when those components are happening, I think will go a long way, as well as other input. I mean, if there's other ideas people have, I mean, literally the departmental requests were advanced in early September as I received them, and then I submitted a complete version of that many weeks later. So when the budget was ultimately balanced. So those would be my comments.
Mr. Graff?
As being the kid that crammed before the last city council meeting, let me ask you a question, and I'm going to ask this not toward anybody in particular, because I'm more than willing to take advice or input for any future aldermen. But if you don't sit on the finance committee, which means you have absolutely no say, you can say what you want at the meeting, but you can't make motions, you can't direct anything in the council or anything toward the budget. So the only opportunity for anybody that doesn't sit on the finance committee is to go to the city council meeting and vet those issues. Period. Unless we have a scheduled committee of the whole meeting prior to the city council meeting, where other aldermen that aren't a part of the finance committee would have the opportunity to vet anything. Because coming to a finance committee meeting and sitting through and I sat through every single one and voiced my opinion on a lot of different things, but I'm not sitting on the committee, I can't make a motion. As Mr. Colt, you've seen tonight, I mean, as soon as you make a motion, everybody catches you on it. And it's not, I'm just saying, as far as the process goes, that is why everything goes to council, so the members of the council that don't have the opportunity to either voice their opinion during the committee meetings or make motions during the committee meetings have the opportunity during a council meeting. And I think discussions at council meetings are extremely healthy.
I think
So if going forward, if we need to set up a committee of the whole meeting prior to, so other alder people have the opportunity to discuss issues in a manner where they can make motions and have it vetted out prior to, I'm okay with that. But unless somebody else comes up to me and tells me a better way, I don't really know, other than going to a city council meeting and bringing up questions, there's no other opportunity for me to vet issues. Making comments from the seat in the back is fine, to get your opinion out there, but at the end of the day, it doesn't do anything. And neither does making motions, because if the rest of the body decides this, you're completely off base, we don't want to go this way, okay, that's fine, at least we vetted the question, and not ultimately I have to go back to the people that come up to me or have concerns to me, and I can say, hey, I brought it up, but nobody else wanted to work. That's the way politics work, and that's fine. But right now, prior Prior, anything outside of the city council meeting, no other aldermen except 3 have the opportunity at the budget.
And I actually really agree with that. The budget was our responsibility, right? The 3 members that were on the committee this year, but I understood Lee's frustration on a couple different things that he brought up. We didn't really take any action on it. We didn't shut him down, but this is a council budget, and I don't know, just going to the council meeting and having it be straight up or down, in the 3rd week of November. I think a committee of the whole meeting, at least one beforehand.
Several weeks.
I mean,
Do a final budget meeting at
Right.
committee of the whole.
and then
And that goes back to the hard deadlines, if that's correct. I mean, in order to do that, we would have to have all those budgetary meetings in October, really, and would that be even?
Or we just have
Well,
to have more.
Because
like,
thinking along the lines that you would have
And
to have that council or the committee of the whole meeting early November.
I was gonna say too, I don't know if, the public can show up, and historically, we've always let them say something, but if it's not noticed as a public hearing, the only thing I'm gonna say is I don't know that people would think they could come and talk. And what if they show up and then they're not recognized or something, and then just there they are, so and then again, it's on, day 0, right? So the public hearing is like, this is when the budget is or is not gonna go through, and then it's late. So I think having one earlier is almost like inviting the public to get more involved in the process. Wishful.
I thought maybe a way to approach it is, why don't you do it this way? Schedule a public hearing before the council meeting that you're gonna vote on to put the budget through. Hold a public hearing, get the inputs from the public, from the people that show up to the public hearing. After that public hearing is closed, have your special council meeting or committee of the whole meeting to make those budget amendments that you decide that you want to get from the public hearing. Then you have the whole council right there anyways, it's already done. Every member of council, whether they sit on the property or finance committee or not, would have the opportunity to sit at the public hearing, and to also then be there for the committee of the whole or special council meeting, and you can get the budget worked out at that time. That way, when you get to your council meeting in November, when you're looking at putting forward your budget, it should be good to go.
I like that idea.
Because then guys like Lee have the opportunity to make motions and.
He was at every meeting.
And Lee was at every meeting. I was at almost every meeting. I don't disagree with having a committee of the whole prior to that, but the concern is having the public hearing, because the state statute requires us to have a public hearing. So then the question is, if we have it at a different time than the actual vote, and we got to be as transparent as possible, and this is the most transparent, and that's why a public hearing is required for it. And I don't have a problem with having committee of the whole with other all the persons who are not members of the finance committee be a part and interject different things, but by no means do I think that our budget process is broken. Absolutely not. There are municipalities that struggle. We got it done in one night, and I think we were back home by 8 o'clock. And Mr. Rayon, with being the ranking member of this city council, I think that you can attest that there's been many other budget processes that have been completely worse than this. So as far as I'm concerned, what is the job? The job is to pass the budget. And the budget got passed. There was no votes on there, but this is how it works. That's politics. And frankly, I think we're trying to fix something that isn't broken. What is actually broken? What came out of this that was broken? Nothing. I mean, I like the idea of potentially modifying something, but if it ain't broken, don't fix it. I don't think it's broken, period. So.
I disagree a little bit, where I think it's broken in the sense that other people not in the finance can't participate by making their own motions to adjust projects or things like that.
And that's where having a committee of the whole,
That's why I think
but keeping the public hearing the same night as a regular council meeting for the purposes of the public, because we're responsible for the public, period.
Well, I agree, and I think once that committee of the whole meeting happens, I think that night of council should be much smoother by then, because everyone's had an opportunity to speak their piece at the committee of the whole. And then they could vote the budget up or down at the meeting then.
So my my question is that if we, let's say we vet this out, committee of the whole meeting prior to the budget city council meeting, but that is when we should hold the public hearing. Because if there's changes to the budget that we would want to discuss, the public input at that meeting could be discussed have the public meeting prior to the committee of the whole meeting that serves as an input, because ultimately, I mean, if we make recommendations and it's not balanced, the mayor's still got to go back and balance the budget and make sure it's balanced. So I mean, we can't just make changes without understanding the ramifications of not having a balanced budget. So I mean, but at the end of the day, I guess by having that public meeting prior to the city council meeting, it's already done. Why even have the public hearing? I mean, you could say we're transparent, but really we're not, because nobody's going to change anything, because we already presented, everybody already vetted out their issues. So you go to that last city council meeting, you say it's done, and the public still, even with the public hearing prior to that meeting, says we couldn't change anything. What was the point of going down there?
That doesn't encourage involvement.
But going back to the committee of the whole meeting prior to, and having a public meeting prior to the committee of the whole, then you can vet those issues out and people will feel like their voices are being heard, because you would still have time to make changes to the budget and make sure it's still balanced before it comes to the final city council meeting.
I would say amen to everything that Alderperson Kubaschak said. And
we really don't get along.
I know, right? Everybody believes we don't get along, but I think we have a pretty decent working rapport. Maybe you don't agree, doesn't matter. But the point is, on the public hearing, the point of the public hearing is that you're not supposed to take more information, what Alderperson Kubaschak was saying, for state statutes, not take a bunch of new information in order to make your decision. So if your interest is to invite the public to comment on your budget proceedings, to move around that public hearing, I think you get into some dangerous territory, and I think that's why I would almost completely agree with everything that Kubaschak has said. Every meeting you have is a public meeting. It's because it's public, it's able to be attended by the public. Whether or not you invite the public participation is up to the chairperson or the rules of the body, if they want to yield the time to invite the public to participate. So I guess if you want a public budget in the sense that the public is creating the budget, I mean, we're going to get rid of the executive budget and redo the way we do our budgeting. We're talking about a whole new system, right? And I guess I'm trying to understand what everyone is saying, that they want the public to be involved. They want to be able to make changes after the public has spoken at the public hearing, move it up a week, which it sounds like it's been done in the past. It can be done again. But I guess you've got eight different ideas, 7 different ideas, because Scott didn't say anything, 7 different ideas thrown on the table here that I'm not so sure you're going to arrive at any consensus at this, to be quite honest. And I was just listening to all the discussion.
What's the point of the public hearing then?
State statute. Right?
Just so there's no point in allowing, or what's the purpose?
Well, I guess looking more broadly, the idea of a public hearing is to allow public input, because technically, even at a finance committee meeting, we don't have to allow public input, period.
So what's the purpose of hearing that public input before we vote on the budget?
It's to sway our decision one way or the other.
Change your mind.
Yeah, it's for the accountability aspect. It's to remind you that you're elected by, certain people in certain districts. I don't know. I can't tell you what the forefathers had for the specific reason for the budget, but I guess it's.
Because if it's to invite public input, obviously at that point doesn't make sense, because you've got a budget already. So.
Well, that's actually a really good philosophical question. Is it to invite input, or is it to hear the public? Because that's what a public hearing is. It's allowing the public to speak because we're represented, we're a representative democracy where we're elected to represent districts or whatever else. So we're in charge of decisions moving forward. So realistically, and again, it is the fact that the public doesn't have to have any input. We can deny public input at any of our meetings, regardless of what it is, except for a public hearing. And yeah, so the question is, do we want to have public input? That's maybe what Mr. Mayor is talking about. We could completely change it. We could create a citizen committee. We could create a commission, of residents and everything else to shape this. But that would be, I guess, really changing it compared to the process that typical municipalities do with an executive budget. Now, is it the perfect way of doing it? No. But what is the true purview of what a public hearing is for? And as far as I know, the answer is to allow public to be heard, whether input is taken or not. I can't, you know.
Well, I would say, thank you. I would say all these finance and property committees, I mean, they were streamed Facebook Live, they were on public access, and I don't think that if the public were to come to these meetings, and each one of those where we address different issues, different departments, I mean, that would definitely, in my mind, be a chance for them to come and voice their opinion. Because really, if they want to know line by line what the budget was, you know, we did that, and that's kind of why we got to the city council meeting, and there were some disagreements, and we're at this conversation of, well, the public should have a chance to voice theirs. And I mean, I would think that if they were here and a resident didn't want to speak at a specific finance and property committee meeting, that we would allow them to. So there is opportunity there, and I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier. We just need to do a better job at getting notification out of these finance and property committees as we're going through this process, and then hopefully the public will come engage at those finance and property committee meetings, and we're not doing it before the official vote on the budget or a week before, and then having to go through and revamp what we just spent months doing in the finance and property. So I think I would just say we promote that they be involved in the committee meetings as they're happening, rather than try to rebuild the whole process.
And I would just say, to the last point about the whole process, that the referral is only specific to the public hearing.
Mhm.
Right.
The agenda item.
And that's my question. If the public hearing truly is just to let people speak their opinion on the budget, yet not to change anything, then there's no point in holding it prior to any other time.
And that's what the body would decide. Us as 8 members decide whether we want to really take input or whether we just want someone to be able to vent, you know. Because I mean, how do we change it for homeless or mass transit, or, you know, when someone spoke about
Right.
that? And again,
Mhm. You've had plenty of practice with budget.
I have, I find the
You can make a
discussion
comment.
very interesting.
May I make a
Yes,
comment?
absolutely.
You're all dancing around a question, except for a couple of you. Public, we pay the taxes, so you really should be listening to what the public has to say. And I don't know what the objection is to having a meeting of the whole and letting the public have their input at that time. You have made several good comments about the public trying to notice the public. If you're not computer savvy, if you're not getting the notices from City Hall, you don't know. And the last public hearing was buried in the council agenda. You had to read through it. Let's face it, we are an aging city, and a lot of people in this city either don't have internet or don't use it. I understand it's expensive to put your notice in the paper, but one time wouldn't hurt in the budget to notice a public hearing on the proposed budget. It wouldn't break your budget. And you would be doing all the citizens in Wisconsin Rapids a great favor. If we don't have any input on how we like to see our tax dollars spent, then why even do it? Why even ask us? You know, this isn't your money you're spending. Well, it is, you're part of it. But you're spending everybody's money in the city of Wisconsin Rapids. And you should at least give them the chance and do them the courtesy of letting them come and let each of you know how they feel about what's in that budget. And if you don't do that, then I think you're very derelict in one of the reasons you were elected for. And the mayor should be very open to transparency. And he said, he brought up the fact, well, sometimes my department heads don't get them in on time, the reports. But Mr. Mayor, the buck stops with you, and if they don't get them in, then you should be on them to get them in on time, or be looking at a different department head.
Did you mention that it was not published in the newspaper?
I don't believe so.
State law requires it, so if you can prove that it wasn't, that's a very big concern. But we have
Where
to
is it
publish.
published? I don't
It's in the
know.
newspaper.
In the notices section.
In the notice, in the back,
Well,
So
then-
if it was, if it, can you, if you.
No, I didn't see it. I don't take the newspaper. See, that's part of the problem. I would bet that half the city does not take the local newspaper. So there'd be no way I could see it.
Another thing that I have to make sure the clerk does is get the budget on the website.
I think it's already out there.
Right.
I think we
But
already
like
did it.
during the process or more in the
Oh,
process.
no, I think we put, Tim and I put it
Oh,
on
okay.
right away, yeah. It's out there, now, final version.
I know the issue about department heads and timeliness, sometimes it is because the committee or council wanted changes made and then they had to go back, and so sometimes it's kind of our fault if we cause, problems for them about a specific item or whatever. But thank you. So any action or further discussion on agenda item number 3?
I'm just trying to think. Or do we encourage that discussion when we actually meet at finance and the budgets? For their involvement?
If you had something.
No, I mean, that's what I would think we should do.
Because we're going
these
through line
discussions-
by line almost line by line, each of the big department heads' budget. And at that time, would that be the right time to encourage public comment while we're going through it at that time?
In the later stages, I think especially.
Or have that final budget meeting as a committee of the whole, where aldermen can make motion?
And I was gonna say, like, to Mr. Graff's point, maybe that should be an issue for the committee of the whole.
I don't have a problem calling a committee of the whole in January or February. We'll have plenty of time to talk about this, but I'd like to see what other municipalities do too, because if it's a case where we could steal an idea from somebody else, that'd be great.
Yeah.
But if we're reinventing the wheel, then.
Yeah.
I was more thinking like our final budget meeting be a committee of the whole where so you can make a motion that you want something changed on a project or a scope on a project or a cost or at some point, because
Could I
Mr. Rayon is next, and you'll be right after him.
It's okay, let her go.
Okay.
No, it's fine. Well, I'm a little confused. I mean, the waters got a little muddied. I believe this referral was made because I was there the night of the budget meeting. And the referral, I believe, was made because of the fact that if the budget did not get approved, that there was the deadline for this budget to be approved. And with everything kind of getting confused that night with the public's input and the possibility of the budget not getting approved, that this referral was made to help kind of expedite this, the budget approval. And so I guess where the whole referral about public's input and where that piece stands as far as helping to pass the budget or not.
we're struggling with the same thing, because is a public hearing an opportunity for citizens to say if they want something changed in the budget, or is it an opportunity for them to speak to the budget, but there's no change going to happen at that time? Because really, that's the 12 o'clock hour where I think at that point it's almost too late.
Well, a public hearing is a public hearing. It's like a committee meeting, it's a committee meeting. The chairman can let who speaks and who doesn't. The committee can decide what rules they want to follow. I think what's being danced around is that there's 8 of us that have been elected for this job. And that is that we vote on this job because 1 or 2 people show up or whatever it is, or 10, and talk against what's there. It's still up to us to make up our own mind. Those people aren't voting. They're speaking. We're listening, hopefully, but it's the 8 of us that sit up there that are voting on that budget or whatever issue it is. In this case, we're talking about a budget. So it seems that we go around all of this that we don't want to make a decision, except for what the council, the citizens want. And I agree to listen. They don't vote. We vote. Now they can change my mind as much. They try to as much as they want to, or not, one way or the other. But we ultimately are the ones who vote. That it's the executive budget. I guess, approved by the council, who has been elected by the city residents of the city of Wisconsin Rapids.
And I don't think it was the public that held up. It was us and our own questions that I think caused the cog in the wheel at that final hour, where I'd like to have that sooner. So realistically, we get to the budget meeting, we've gone through it so many times, and those concerns and issues have already been addressed, and the budget meeting should, I hate to say be a finale, but we should have pretty much ironed out by then. And I'm just as guilty.
And this is finance, so you guys are to make the decision, but Thad mentioned about, committee of the whole, January, February, or whatever, that could be a time to adjust how things are being run, such as this. We could have a committee of the whole, or 2 if we need it, whatever, to what would we like to see change in how we operate, that we operate. Or, I guess, give direction to staff too, on how to operate, but staff has to come up with the budget. Now, I guess we could sit in all the meetings and go over it with them and the mayor and whoever's all there. And maybe that's the way to do it, because then we get our say in for it, what's written out finally. But to me, the information has to get out to us. It has to be out to the public, and the public has to be, I guess, for a public hearing, which we have to. That somehow is going to have to be, they're going to have to be notified, and how we proceed with that then is again up to us. And that, I guess all of this may be worthy of that discussion to have in a committee of the whole.
Okay, so I would just like to reiterate, I think we definitely need to do more to engage folks in the actual finance and property committee meetings if the public wants to come and speak. And I'm sure all of us on this council would agree, we would let them voice at that. But to this specific item, I mean, we have to have a public hearing on it anyway. I don't see a problem with it being earlier, so we can prevent some of the situations we've been in before, and I think we've all went around on this tonight. So, I mean, I'll make a motion that we have the annual budget hearing before the final council meeting, that we vote on it, which is the item, I believe, correct? So,
I guess when you're looking, actual before the meeting, or a week before, or
I would say a week.
Or,
I'd say at least a week, so we can get the public there, get their input, and then if we need to have follow-up meetings because of what might come out of that, we have some time to do so.
I'd second that.
Motion and second to have the public.
Well, it's your,
I'm just rereading the motion.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Again, though, I think to have that the week before would be fine. I guess if there's adjustments to make, or the council want, us, if we want to make the adjustments during that week's time and staff to get new numbers up there, that when that would go before the council, the public hearing has been held. Really, what I think then is the only discussion that evening would be the 8 of us.
Absolutely.
Correct.
We don't need a second public
That's what
hearing.
it'd be. Because sometimes what we get is we have 2 and 3 public hearings that, see, they're not all called public hearings, where we debate things at committee, we debate things at committee, goes to council, and we, not just us debate it, the city debates it. And I'm not saying that's wrong, because they want to be involved, and I want them to be involved, but, you know, sometimes you're just chasing that thing down the road, and they do have, the chance is there to be involved, and at some point, a decision has to be made, you know, so that's why if you have that the week before, that's the route to go, that the hearing is done, the comments are made, staff is gonna have to be directed, I guess, what to look back to, change in numbers, or if I guess it's to totally take something out, and you just wipe it out, I guess, but the numbers would change what the end result is. But, so, you know, not to have a public hearing that Tuesday night before, and then Tuesday night of the budget, that it basically turns into another public hearing, because
We can't
otherwise,
have that.
and that's where you're gonna, people get excited, and we got till December 1st, or January 1st, or whatever, to do this, to have another meeting, but it'd be easier to make a meeting, make that determination than maybe that night, so.
Mr. Chair, there might be a simple solution here. As somebody who's done almost 24 of these in their lifetime, Mr. Rayomi is spot on. Have the public hearing, take the public comments. For those council members that wish to make amendments to the budget, have them on the listed agenda for discussion amongst yourself, per the comments from the public hearing, and then go forward and adopt the budget. That would let all of the council members know what the other council members were thinking. If you heard public comments that say, hey, we don't like this, council member can say, okay, I propose the following amendment to the budget based on the public hearing. You guys get to discuss it, either adopt it or not, and then the budget goes forward.
Can I interject one last thing? I'm looking at state statute underneath, and it says not less than 10 days after the publication of a proposed budget. Now, the term proposed budget is an official budgetary number that is published in a newspaper. So if and it says that the public hearing is based on that. The problem is that if there's a proposed budget, and now we're taking input, and we already had the public hearing, and now this budget changes, there isn't a proposed budget anymore. So then do we have to have a secondary public hearing? Technically, you don't have to have a second public hearing, but it's a case where it's based on the proposed budget. So now if we're taking public hearing input on that proposed budget and the budget drastically changes, are we being transparent with that? So I
talked to Tim before.
Right, you have to have the reason the public hearing is really an offshoot of publishing a budget summary, which actually, you know, and I'm not sure, and then you have to have at least 15 days from, you know, you said 10, but I think it's 15.
15 for school district, 10, it says
Oh, okay,
10 for.
10.
Yeah.
Between the time of the publication and the hearing, and so the public hearing is really is about that document that they're looking at that's been published, and I'm not sure, you know, practically speaking, what budget was published for us 10 days before that public hearing. I mean, at one point, was it just the latest one that the, you know, finance had agreed to, I'm assuming, but I just, so that you know that that's that 10 days there, that there is actually, you know, you will have had to do some work to get it to that point at least, and then obviously things can be changed, and you don't need another public hearing once you've had that one.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be the budget being.
Yeah, and you can pass the budget then after. Obviously, it doesn't have to be a public hearing or regularly a time limit other than the other external requirements.
And again, I think we're making, to some degree, we're making, not to make light of the issue, but we're talking around this thing. I think that we're making, trying to fix something that isn't totally off the wheel.
That was the first thing I said.
Right, and so that if there's adjustments to be made or whatever, to look at that. But I don't think I don't know if an out and out wipe something out and totally something new or whatever is the right way to do it. Without a plan, you know, you could say what we've done isn't good. We ain't gonna do that, but what are we gonna do? What's gonna take its place?
Exactly.
There was a motion and a second to hold the public hearing for the annual budget at least 1 week prior to the council meeting, that the budget will be voted on. Is there any further discussion on that item? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 3-0. Item number 4, consider a referral from Alderperson Coth that if the budget is not approved by the deadline, the council shall not receive pay until the budget is passed. Do you want to speak to that, Steve?
I was given some information subsequently by the council's paid by ordinance.
Right.
So that to restrict council pay would be an ordinance change, correct?
That's correct, and I have some further thoughts on that too, or if you, whatever you.
It's pretty much as it's written is that we have a responsibility to the public to pass a balanced budget, and if we can't do it, we should forfeit our monthly council pay until we put forth a budget that's passed and accepted.
I almost did it again. I'm sorry. I'm looking at Steve as I'm pointing to you.
I'm gonna go back to what Thad said, is that I think it's something not broken. We've never, ever not passed a budget. And I think we're trying to lay something out, a penalty for something that has never occurred yet. And I could understand if we were repeatedly having budget issues at the final hour, not passing budgets and holding additional budget meetings to get done by that December deadline, then I could see putting punitive damage or punitive, you know, a penalty on us for not passing the budget. But I think we're setting up a penalty for something that has not ever existed yet.
And just watch this last budget process. I just wonder, could it almost be a penalty for doing what you believe is your, you know, due diligence to really vet certain items, and you know maybe that's causing a hold up. I mean, I don't know. Do we want to? I don't think we want to steer people off from trying to, you know, address issues that they, not pointing anyone out, but you know, address issues that they perceive in the budget that they maybe want cut. I don't know. That's just my thought.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think what we're seeing is that kind of the theme of tonight is that we're afraid to have a debate at the city council meeting.
Yeah.
So we want to vet everything out prior to the city council meeting, because during the city council meeting, we just don't want to argue anything. We just want to agree to everything and move forward.
Yeah, I want to try and argue with you, Mr. Grant.
We have a lot to talk about. Argue.
2 weeks.
So I guess.
I guess I think legally this would be against public policy and probably illegal. Once your salary is set, it can't be increased or decreased during your term, and it's supposed to be really set for the position, not for whether the person does a job or not. So I guess it would be my advice that anything, certainly something that basically said if you don't pass the budget, you don't get paid, that would interfere with a present salary that's already been set for an older person. And then secondly, even if you had an ordinance, let's say, that said, you know, if we don't do a budget, we're not, I think that's against public policy. And again, the whole idea of the compensation for elected officials, it's for the position. It's not how well you do the position. It's not to have your pay increase or decrease based on your performance. It's so I guess I would strongly advise against changing or having something like this for other person pay.
Any further discussion? Any action on the item? No action taken on item number 4. Rick Makoka is here from Reggie. Just want to give us a brief update. There'll be no action taken on the update.
If you have any questions,
Yeah,
contact Rick directly.
Yeah, contact me directly. This isn't a discussion period. Wasn't anticipating listening to an hour to talk about the budget, but I did talk on the radio last month and complimented, congratulated all of the municipalities for the hard work that they do putting a budget together. Hope the public was listening because they would see how much concern you all have about doing this correctly. And easily for newly elected officials, first-time budget is the most daunting thing that they'll do in their first term. So you're all to be congratulated. Every now and then, budget hearings are a little tough, right? Downtown Rome, as we've had our share. So you're all to be congratulated on doing your job well. And as Mr. Raymond said, your job is to manage the community. It's to listen to the people. It's to manage the community. And congratulations. So you suffered through it. They may not all be like that, but good job. In the coming year, now that you have your budget put together, you're not very often rewarded by having additional revenue streams. I'm going to steal a little mayor's thunder, and it's a little ahead of time, but the news is so good it's fun to share. The airport's a gift that keeps on giving. Mr. Arnie Nystrom and Jeremy went over to visit Gulfstream last week and then came back with good news, and it looks like the airport project is going to be getting at least another $1 million. So it's not going to come without its encumbrances. There is going to be some discussions I'm sure you'll have, and as the official minutes of the airport meeting come out from next Thursday, make sure you all grab a hold of that and see what's up. So that is very, very good news. Also, the good news of the last couple of months has been ND Paper. ND is already announcing that they are expanding their original announcement of $190 million, and it's only going to bode good things for Wisconsin Rapids. So the economic development partners that you have as a city are looking forward to working with ND. I've already met with the general manager 3 times. And we're looking at some of the supply chains that could be located here. And again, just looking ahead, next year is going to be a lot of fun because I think you're going to see some growth opportunities both in here and here. Yesterday we had a meeting on transportation issues for the local area at the Heart. Joe Terry was there. And it was probably the best collection of Wisconsin Rapids business leaders that we've had in a single room in a long time. Mr. Mansell was there, Mr. Berlin was there from Mariani, Ocean Spray was represented, Verso, ND, everyone was represented there. And what we really talked about is the disconnect of Wisconsin Rapids and the central Wisconsin area to freeway access and some of the challenges. Energy Composites, Jeremy related that they got a great order for a couple dozen 25-foot diameter tanks, and to get them to a barge on Lake Michigan cost his company $2 million. That's not the kind of economic response we need from the Department of Transportation for moving goods and services out of our central Wisconsin area to get them to a freeway or get them to a barge or get them to the rest of the world. We need to have better competitiveness in this. And so we had 3 of our area legislators there yesterday. They listened and took notes. And one of the reasons that we had that is local economic development synergy. Reggie, Encourage, and ND are sponsoring once again Central Wisconsin Days down in Madison at the end of February. And what we do is we take the talking points of the area concerns and we take them to legislators. Last year, I had a group of 5. We contacted and voiced those concerns to 18 different legislative offices in Madison, and there was 10 other groups like me. So we cover a lot of people. We want to let them know that Southeast Wisconsin is not the only place that's developing economically, that we're important up here too. We have concerns and we need to get those addressed. And one of the things that legislators will tell you is they have a stack this high on one side of their desk of people calling with problems. They have a stack about this high on the other side of the desk that are solutions. So when we go down there and talk to them, we talk specificity and we talk solutions that are applicable to central Wisconsin, and we're likely to get a good share of them addressed by the legislators. So those are the things I just wanted to share with you. Next year is coming up to be a good year. Sean Krennick, the general manager of ND, he says, Rick, when you talk to people, share with them that ND is going to be the compassionate company that was paper company that Wisconsin Rapids used to have. So I'm looking forward, as many of you are, to seeing Indy paper on the back of a Little League uniform next year as they step out and start sponsoring some of the community activities like we've seen in the years past. So thanks for allowing me the time to address you. If you have any questions, you can contact me individually. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Agenda item number 5 is audit of the bills for November 2018.
I'll make a motion to adopt.
I'll second. Motion is second to approve the bills. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Item number 6, beverage operator licenses.
I'll make a motion we approve. I looked at them prior.
I looked at them prior as well, and I'll second that. Motion is second to approve the licenses. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 3-0. I'll slow down a little bit. Set next meeting date. First Tuesday, the 8th.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, so how about 5:30 on December 18th?
Okay.
And then do we want to set a regular meeting for January right away?
I see it's on New Year's Day.
New Year's Day at 5?
So I'll be out of town for work the week after that, too, the week of January 7th.
Okay.
So I don't know where that falls. If that,
Does the second work for you?
yeah, I can make the second work.
Second work for you?
I can try. If not, I'll find somebody.
Or the third. I mean that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday that week before, I'll still be around. It's just I'll be gone the entire next week.
With committee meetings, have we ever Skyped or done anything like that with it being a referral rather than?
We've done teleconference for one person if they can't make it.
We get dinners and stuff.
Sure.
What's Public Works gonna do?
We haven't thought about it.
We haven't discussed it, I guess, without doing that, it'd be that day.
Well, why don't we all look at our calendars on December 18th? We'll set our next meeting date then. So December 18th at 5:30.
Or can we talk about that maybe next week? Because next, I'd like to have a meeting per the email I had sent out to all of you. The one item agenda pertaining to the aquatic development. If there's a time next week that we can talk about that project. I propose Tuesday night, the 11th, if that works for everyone. If you haven't read your email, please do.
Oh,
I didn't take the time to send it.
I'm good on Tuesday.
It's a black hole. Thank you.
Tuesday works for me. Second Tuesday of the month.
Yeah,
December.
Yeah,
December
or
11th.
I would suggest it would be a finance and property. It could be anything.
So committee, how about we do not meet on the 18th and instead we meet on December 11th for the two agenda items.
Yes.
At 5 p.m. Does that work?
Yes.
Yes.
5 p.m. on December 11th will be our next meeting. I just want to point out, I know I heard a comment, but if an alderperson makes referral to the committee, I'm not going to be the guy who's going to keep the agenda item off my agenda. So anyone who makes referral, your referral is going to get on the agenda. So I just wanted to say that. Item number 8 is adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
A second. Aye. There's a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We stand adjourned.